Hello, I'm Lisa Dorr, and this is Livewire, the Minnesota Peace and Justice Coalition alternative public affairs news program. Today we are taking a look at Ethiopia and the Oromo Nation. The Oromo Nation is a group of people in southern Ethiopia who've been struggling for over 100 years to regain the sovereignty lost when the European community cut Africa up as a piece of pie. Today we have with us the chair of the Oromo Support Committee, Tafari Fufa, and he is a resident in Minneapolis here working with the Oromo Relief Association internationally to help supply relief to the Oromo people. Tafari, why don't we talk about the Oromo people here? Maybe we should begin with a map that we have to give people a feel. Thank you for coming here tonight to talk about this too.
Well, thank you, Lisa. The Oromo people live in an area that looks like this, and it's almost the southern two-thirds of Ethiopia that is occupied by the Oromo people. The Oromo people, prior to their incorporation into the Ethiopian Empire, had a democratic system.
So they have a traditional system of democracy.
Right, going way back to the 1500s, they were ruled by a system called the Gada system, and political leaders were elected every 8 years with no chance for re-election.
Well, one term.
And a one-term office, and it was, it worked wonderfully for them for a while. And this egalitarian society then came with the Abyssinians from the north. At that time they were called Abyssinians, now the Amhara. And their system was a monarchy.
Okay.
So it was a totally alien rule they fell under.
So northern Ethiopian system was a monarchy as opposed to the Oromo system, which was egalitarian democracy.
Right, yeah. And ever since they were occupied, the Oromo people have been trying to regain their freedom.
Okay, so they were originally a nation within southern Ethiopia, and they were occupied by whom?
By the Abyssinians. At that time, there was a tiny Christian empire known as Abyssinia. And for some reason, the Europeans thought the Abyssinian empire would be a good ally of Europeans.
Of the Europeans.
Of the Europeans. And so when they decided to impose arms embargo on African nations as they were cutting up Africa into different spheres of European influence, Abyssinia was allowed to have its own share of the pie.
I see.
And it was given unlimited supply of arms in order to occupy the surrounding nations up to where the Europeans will allow Abyssinia to expand its own territories.
So we had a situation where the Europeans had cut up Africa to have their own spheres of influence, but then within Ethiopia, they actually had the northern Amhara people who had their own influence over Oromo and other African peoples too.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, it's
and that's all late 1800s? Or?
Right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the capital city of today's Ethiopia in 1889 was known as Fenfene, which was Oromo name. It was an Oromo town. Then they came down from the north, wiped out the Oromos there. And the king at that time, known as Menelik, who was credited to be the architect of modern Ethiopia, saw the beautiful place there and called it Addis Ababa. The meaning is new flower.
The new flower.
Yeah, and ever since the seat of the seat of government for Ethiopian Empire has been Addis Ababa, and ironically, the Oromos who surround the area, whose town it was, have no rights whatsoever and can't even speak their language in offices even when they serve in the offices there in the lower ranks.
So today's Oromo people are not allowed to speak their own language?
No.
Within the,
no, the language, the culture, and especially this egalitarian culture was meant to be destroyed. It hasn't been destroyed. As you can see, the Oromo flag that we have over here, the tree in the middle is the Oda tree, which is a symbol of Oromo nation. Conflicts are resolved by going to the Oda tree and sitting under the shade of the Oda tree. Elders settled disputes. Important matters were discussed. And so our tradition is brought back and is shown on the Oromo flag.
A place of compromise where people meet together to solve problems.
Right, and this too is outlawed in Ethiopia.
The flag is outlawed in Ethiopia?
Well, it isn't allowed, no.
Wow.
It only exists where the Oromo Liberation Front has freed the people, and they are using it in the liberated areas.
Well, there's several different issues that I would like to talk about in terms of the problems that the Oromo Nation are facing. We have a little bit of historical background, and to talk about the political rights of this country, I think we need to have a little discussion about what's going on in Ethiopia politically. We're hearing a lot on the news these days about how the leader of Ethiopia has decided that socialism has got to go and that it's time for Ethiopia to start looking toward the West for leadership. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about Ethiopia's alliances with the Soviet Union and these changes that we're seeing now occurring.
Lisa, in 1976, I remember being asked by a person who came to me and said, "Aren't you happy now? Ethiopia has changed. Now socialism is in place. Aren't you happy?"
Ethiopia.
Right. And I said, I really don't have any problem with what they said the government is. Just give me the government at work and I'll tell you if I like it or not.
All right.
And I saw Ethiopian socialism at work and I didn't like it. Prior to that, I saw Ethiopian democracy at work and I didn't like it. And the change that was just announced by the President Mengistu, he was Colonel Mengistu, wasn't any different from the change to socialism. I don't know how much you remember when the army at that time, the day
70s.
before, the day before was fighting on the side of Emperor Haile Selassie. One night they went to bed and got up in the morning and decided to become socialists. And they were die-hard socialists, and they killed, thousands, hundreds and of thousands of people. Now they turn around and they say they are doing away with socialism. Why do they do that? Because Moscow is tired. Moscow isn't able to provide any more weapons. Now they want the West to provide the weapons, and so they are coming to conversion. It is a colonial state. It's a tiny minority of people ruling over a large population that they are holding without any rights, and that isn't going to change.
So whether we're looking at a Western-backed democracy, quote-unquote, or we're looking at a Soviet-backed socialist state, you don't see a change in that power structure within Ethiopia. What kind of population are we talking about here? The Oromo people, or how many Oromo people are there?
Ethiopian population is now estimated at somewhere between 44 and 46 million. Out of that, roughly 24, 25 million is Oromo.
Okay, so 50, 60% of the country is Oromo.
Right, and then you have the Tigray people, and then you have the Eritrean people, and then you have the Sidama, and you have the Western Somali, which are in the Ogaden. the rest are grouped in that. And the Amhara make up at best 10% of the population. And these are the rulers who are enforcing their own culture, their own language, and even the history. You will be surprised when you pick up the history of Ethiopia, and the only history that exists is the history of the Amhara.
The world according to the Amhara.
Right.
Well, we have a little precedent for that here in the United States, too, when we pick up our history. It's the world according to white men, Protestants mostly. So I think that's a recognized tool that who's telling the story, who's telling the history is very important. So the Amhara people make up 10% of the population, but were able to consolidate their power with colonial ties. So
there wasn't one time when they did not have one major power supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
The British have supported them. The Italians have supported them. The United States supported them for a long time, from 1950s to about 1976.
I see. So World War II, the Amhara worked with the Italian Mussolini.
No, well, they
forces,
didn't. No, they didn't. The Italians, the French, their part of the support was in cooperation with other European powers when they decided to give arms to Abyssinia in order to conquer the neighboring states,
mm-hmm.
so Ethiopian empire could have its current shape.
Mm-hmm.
But the British really did help. The British were helping their air force over there, especially to bomb,
mm-hmm.
Oromo areas. In 1928, a major Oromo uprising was subdued by the British Royal Air Force, and the United States helped, especially in the 60s. In the Bale Highlands, the Oromo resistance was very strong, and the United States Air Force, along with Israeli paratroopers, were the ones who were able to subdue Oromo resistance at that time.
And that's the kind of history that you're not seeing in your...
Changing. It doesn't... That's not the only thing, but we were someplace before we were incorporated into Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
We were forcefully incorporated into Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
This does not appear, I went to school in Ethiopia for 12 years. I've studied history of everybody else on earth except the history of Oromo.
Mm-hmm.
That part is weeded out, and they had hoped that the Oromos would be worked out of existence, and they would forget themselves, and the world will forget them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're almost right. The world has almost forgotten the existence of Oromos.
So at this point, when we hear about media coverage in Ethiopia, a lot of the problems of famine and civil war in Ethiopia, you're saying take a look at that as a battle between cultures, as an attempt by the people of Oromo to maintain their sovereignty in the face of a minority government. Is there a war going on between the Oromo people? Is this just political oppression, or is there actually a military operation?
Starting in 1976, the Oromo Liberation Front formally organized a armed struggle. Started on the eastern part, right?
Map up here.
Yeah.
This is the African Horn.
Yeah.
The east coast of Africa. You have Arabia up in the corner, and
yeah. Here is Kenya, and Somalia is over here. Tiny Djibouti, the former French colony. Egypt is up here. Sudan is over here. And traditional Ethiopia is over here. Here is Eritrea, which is getting much of whatever is filtering out through the media right now.
So that's where we're getting information on the famine and
right, and the fighting, especially the fighting currently. But as far as the Oromo is concerned, a major battle went on, where the Ethiopians lost a town called Asosa. Even President Mengistu's speech did have much on it. 6 Cubans were captured here when the town was captured.
And when was this?
In January 5th.
January of 1990,
right.
There was battles between Oromo
Right.
Liberation Front people and
the Ethiopian government forces in which the Cubans were captured. And as far as I know, the Cubans are still in the hands of the Oromo Liberation Front. Negotiations were going on to affect their release. I don't know where it has gotten so far. And then there is also a big guerrilla activity going on between the Oromo Liberation Front over here and the Ethiopian forces. And so...
where are Oromo forces getting support?
Well, surprisingly, every time they need weapons, they do a major attack. Like over here, when they captured this garrison town known as Asosa, they captured several weapons, including tanks. They rolled away some tanks.
So they're picking up the Russian the AK-47s that
the AK-47s, RPGs, and quite a bit of heavy equipment. So there is no lack of weapons. They can go to any government center as garrison and overrun it and take their weapons. So the weapons, the supplier of the weapons so far to all sides of the war has been the Soviet Union, simply because the Soviets send it to Ethiopia. Ethiopian forces can't hold on to them. And they sometimes burn their ammunition before they fled, but if they are overrun without knowing, then the arms are captured.
Well, obviously one of the most common results of any war situation are the people caught in the middle, and the refugee situation in Oromo is obviously going to be a great concern too. How many refugees are we looking at here? What kind of scale?
In and around the Horn of Africa, bordering Ethiopia, today there are a little over 500,000 Oromo refugees, and they are scattered all over. And most of those are found in camps where the Oromo Relief Association is trying to provide them with their needs. Now, when we talk about Oromo refugees, where do they come from? Really, the main source of Oromo refugees is the government activities in far away, deeper into the heart of Oromo land, where the Oromo Relief Association, Oromo Liberation Front hasn't even gotten. There is daily raids in homes, in villages, to capture people into the militia so that they can fight on the side of the government. Ethiopia.
So the government goes in and takes the young men away from the militia, which is done by the Salvadoran and the Guatemalan governments as a common practice too.
Unfortunately,
when you look at oppressive governments, getting their army built up is a real problem for them.
That's one. The other thing is, somebody is often accused of sympathizing with the Oromo Liberation Front in the family. That person is arrested, and the others are then to be a warning to the others who might have the same ideas. Family members are shot or tortured in front of their neighbors. So when somebody is arrested in the neighborhood, others fled for fear that they will be next or they might be tortured. Another way the government chases people away is through the resettlement program, bringing northerners into Oromo areas to dilute Oromo concentration there.
Now, are they also doing that because of famine problems in northern Ethiopia?
Well, mainly not famine, but there too, up north too, they are facing rebellion. And if they remove the people from there, the more people they can remove from the north, the less people would be rising against them.
So they're bringing people from the north to quiet down a situation in the north, and also to help suppress the southern resistance.
Yeah. And so they displace these people, and they don't provide them with anything, and at the same time they even force them to serve the settlers in order to create animosity between the settlers and the indigenous peoples. They automatically create animosity by making these people serve these people.
The Oromo people are required to serve settlers from northern Ethiopia that are brought in.
And so that contributes to the refugee outflow. And then the Ethiopians had another program called, I don't know what will happen now with their change, but the program called villagization, where they decided to tear down existing villages and force people to move into new village centers. And that will help the government to keep an eye on who is doing what. And that also was contributing to refugee outflow. And of course the war, whenever there is war going on, there are civilians who are caught up in between, and they run away. And so the number of refugees, Oromo people, either displaced within their own country or who have made it across international borders, who are needing support, is increasing dramatically.
And how many of these people have actually left Africa? Are they scattered around the world, or is
I wouldn't be able to give you figures, but lately there are some refugees, Oromo refugees, who have been able to make it to the United States, Canada, Western Europe, even as far as Australia. All over in the Middle East, there are Oromo refugees. Another problem that the Oromo refugees are suffering from is, like I said, because of the oppressive nature of the Ethiopian government, they were not able to be urbanized, educated, and so forth.
So they're the undereducated?
They are the undereducated, and once they make it to refugee camps, it takes them up to 2 years to be identified as a refugee. Once they are identified, some people call them economic refugees, because any uneducated person cannot have political ambitions. And if you don't have political ambitions, you can't be a political refugee, and because of that you are economic refugee. And the United Nations High Commission for Refugees negotiates with Ethiopia to return them. Ethiopia gets the money. They get shipped back. Some of them end up in jail. Some of them return. Some of them jump from trains and die. We have reports of tragic situations going
on. The work that you're doing here in the Twin Cities through the Oromo Support Committee is connected to a larger international operation of the Oromo Relief Association, and I think we can put up here for people who are interested, who may want to get more information from you. I know they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, what we are trying to do is the Oromo Relief Association formed in 1979 because of this rise of Oromo refugees, number of Oromo refugees, and their needs not being met. A few refugees themselves started a self-help type of a thing, and then in Europe and in North America we started a support group for this. For the most part, the Sudan has been very friendly to the Oromos in providing safe passage of supplies that are sent in, like foods and medication, that had been sent.
So you work, the relief comes through the Sudan?
Yeah.
Southern Ethiopia.
And recently the Somali government has also allowed the Oromo Relief Association to operate in Somalia, so we have an office there now. And like I said, the needs are increasing, and our efforts, there are not that many Oromos, and our issue is not a burning issue in the eyes of international communities. We have not been able to gain the sympathy of many of the larger international relief agencies, and because of that, our duty as support committees is to approach people and try to make our cause known, and then also tries to raise as much funds as we could to support this
medical and
worthy
food.
cause. Yeah.
Okay. So where can people write for information?
In Minneapolis, the Oromo Support Committee has a P.O. box. It's a P.O. box 14456, and it's in southeast Minneapolis. 55414 is the zip code. We don't even have an office. Everything we get, we send over there.
A lot of the best work that's done is done in people's living rooms.
Right.
So we know that.
So my telephone number is 378-3996, and our secretary, whose name is Jerry, her telephone number is 521-2983.
521-2983.
Right.
For more information.
Right.
I think it's really important for Livewire particularly is interested in trying to analyze the changes that are going on around the world with our glorious change from socialism to capitalism that we keep hearing covered in our media and from all of our leaders. And I really appreciate the fact that you were able to come here tonight and talk about what kind of impact that could have on the people, the Oromo people in southern Ethiopia, because we don't hear that news enough, and to have it firsthand is really important to us. So, how many years have you been doing this work with the relief committee? Is this something that's spanned 10 or 20 years, or?
Like I said, in '79 is when the Oromo Relief Association itself started. Before that, just some of us who have been here have just gotten together to talk and talk about what is happening to our nation, what will happen to us, what will become of us.
And what kind of impact you can have.
Right.
From
and then since then, off and on, we have to live too. We have to survive ourselves. But with as much as we could, we had gathered, some American supporters of the Oromo. And we do this. We have regular meetings, and we try to have public events in which we have both educational and fundraising activities.
And try to raise the issue with the media too.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. And Livewire is alternative public affairs news show that's sponsored by the Minnesota Peace and Justice Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll catch you again later.